quick! What if I told you to create an automation that turns on the porch light every evening? How long do you think it would take you? And for those of you with experience with Home Assistant or the Smart Home Cartel, you might say probably a minute or so. Others with less experience, you might say it may take you a few minutes. I can do it in less time than it took me to say this intro. Okay, so I do have a confession to make. That wasn't me creating the automation. That was my wife. And it was easy for her to do it. She only got a little bit annoyed that I interrupted her dinner to do that test.
Hello, Internet. He is interrupting my dinner.
So I guess that's a win. Before you get too excited, first, let me show you one more thing.
Okay, watch this. Hey, can you help me create an automation?
Sure, I'd be happy to help. What's the name of the automation you'd like to create?
Yeah, let's call it a porch light.
When should the porch light automation run, and what command should it execute?
Ooh, 2 for 1. Let's see, let it run at sunset and make it turn off the porch light switch.
Your preferences has been updated.
Sweet.
To show you that it actually got stored, it's here in this cron plus. So if we click on dynamic schedules, you can see that the porch light schedule has been created. It's going to look at a solar event and it knows that it's going to be sunset. And it's looking at sunset of the next day. It's going to be sunset soon here, so it's going off of the next day. Look at that, look at that. And then operation, turn off the porch light switch. Ah, yeah. We're on to something.
Fam, my name is Michael Montague, and I like to explore ideas that excite me. That's what we do here on Tech Enthusiast.
Get excited.
I use Home Assistant and a low-code platform called Node-RED. All of my automations are written using Node-RED because it's insanely powerful and flexible and lets me create all the automations you see on this channel. All of them. If I'm thinking of this correctly, I don't think there's ever really been a situation where Node-RED did not work for me. And with that said, I know a lot of you are unfamiliar with it. I want you to look at the screen. You see that floating down? You see that on the screen? Yeah, it's your invitation. What are you waiting for? Use it. So let's say Node-RED is not your thing. I got you though, I get it. You don't have to worry. I don't really like creating tutorials, but I do like talking about concepts because unlike tutorials, concepts don't care about how, it cares about what. You get to decide on the how. Okay, so you might be thinking I'm a bit crazy and talking really vague. Here's an example. The second automation I showed you here in this video is conceptually the same as the first easier automation. I just tweaked the how and it felt brand new. Let me show you what I mean. The first automation can be thought up in 3 phases. The first is what I refer to as the reading phase. This is how I trigger automations and how information gets parsed into the system. I'm using Obsidian as a trigger, and the information that gets parsed in is the content within the note. But you might be saying, Michael, how do you get Obsidian to trigger an automation in Home Assistant? Nah, nope. You're asking a how question. We are dealing with what questions right now. I'll get to the how in a bit. And here's a hint, it's Node-RED. Once the text is in the system, the next phase begins, which is the reasoning phase. Your text can say absolutely anything. You can ask it to turn on the lights. You could tell it about your problems or how you saved money by switching to the automation Trilogy. Yep, this video is brought to you by me, but I'll talk to you about that later. I don't want to interrupt this. Point is, since during the reading phase your smart home can receive any text, the system will need a way to understand what to do with it. The reasoning phase is where that happens. I use AI to read the strings and run a predefined set of automations. Okay, so what do I mean by predefined set of automations? In my system, I have a handful of generalized automations. For example, I have an automation that can turn devices such as switches and lights off and on. I also have an automation that can answer general knowledge questions, or an automation that can update and read contents from calendars. You get the idea. These automations are specific in purpose, but general in application. This means that when my automation to toggle switches and lights will toggle any switch and any light. My automation to answer questions will answer any question. The automation takes a dynamic input and produces a very specific output. Specific purpose, General application. So the reasoning phase will read the text and run an automation to execute this command in the future. Now the responding phase. This is the last phase and it's responsible for outputting a response. In this case, we get a simple message that the preferences has been updated, which is good enough to tell me that this had worked. Now when it's time for the automation to trigger again, this 3-phase process will begin again. It's going to read the text, it's going to reason about what to do with it, and then it's going to respond with an answer. Hopefully you now understand the mechanics of this automation and you get to implement it using your platform and any tools that you're most comfortable with. If you understood the assignment, go in peace and build something dope. If you still need a little bit more help and what I mentioned was too high level for you, the how doesn't matter as much as you think. I'm gonna prove it to you. I'm gonna build a standalone version. All right, let's start with the reading phase. We need a way to trigger the automation to get text in. So I'm gonna use the sentence node, which is what you see here. Now we have control over assist. Now, since this is a smart home agent, we need the automation to keep track of the conversation and ask the right questions to output the correct answer. So I'm gonna create the prompt for the system, and that's done here. You don't need to worry about all of that. Just know that this is where we're creating the system prompt and where we're also putting in the user information. But the important thing to look at is that we're going to be refeeding the answers back to the prompt so it knows what to ask. So as we learned about the name and the time and the command, it's going to fill that in. But to be safe, I'm also having in here this conversation ID, and what that will do is it'll also keep track of the conversation behind the scenes. Now for simplicity, I am going to use a single tool node, which is what you see right here, and this is what defines what we expect. You saw before we're talking about the name and the time and the command. Here's where we define all of that. So we have this JSON schema that's telling us, hey, when we talk to you, we want you to try to gather the name, the time, and the command, and then ask any questions to gather any information that's missing. Now, as the LLM works, it's gonna output the answers, and I'm gonna store them here until I get all the answers that I need, and then this is basically what the agent is, right? The agent just kind of does its job indeterminately until it reaches the end state, and then it's just gonna go out. And this is where it calls the rest of the automation. And by rest of the automation, I mean the part that is actually doing the work of storing the command and refiring it when it needs to fire. Now, I know for a damn sure that sounded like crazy talk, but I promise this is gonna make sense with an example. So let's come here. First, I'm going to ask the AI a question. I need help. It's less of a question and more of a command, but whatever. So let's start by naming the automation. Now, what you've noticed here is we've sent text into the system, and the text is fed into the AI. It gets all the way over here, and the AI has the following it needs to collect from me: the name, the time, and the command. The name is the name of the automation, the time is the time when it should trigger, and the command is what should happen when the trigger starts. The AI knows it needs to collect this information, so it's instructed to ask questions to get it from me, and you can see that here. We're gonna go back and forth a few times, and each time when information is revealed, it's gonna be stored. So let's go back here. So we're gonna call this, let's say porch light. All right. Oh, nice. So you have a few options as to what happened here. When the AI finished and concluded that it had all the information, it could have, let's say, stored the information into Obsidian, just the same way that you saw how when we had the Obsidian document and it was able to read the text and then create automations based off of it, we could have just stored it there. So that way we have a visible way of looking at it. Or we can just have it create the automation silently behind the scenes and just tell us, hey, I've done it for you, no need to worry about anything. You have options. Like, all of these things come together to give you so much options. And if you look at it closely, the concept is just the same as the first one, but it's just tweaked in the way that it's executed. The how it's done is just tweaked, but what is being done is essentially the same. In the automation at the beginning, I swapped the written form of assist with a speech-to-text version. And in this version, instead of doing Obsidian, I used assist instead. Okay, that's a lot. That's a lot, I understand. If this feels overwhelming, I expected that. It is supposed to be overwhelming. What I've just done was condensed about 5 hours or so of information into about 10 to 20 minutes. There was a lot of concepts I touched on, like for instance, the 3R framework of reading, reasoning, and responding. I talked about software engineering principles like the choreography pattern without actually talking about the software engineering principles. I demoed one automation 3 different ways for you, and I only scratched the surface. If you want to deep dive at your own pace and really get to understand how I do what I do, check the description for the automation trilogy. Even if you don't know how to use Node-RED, the concept and ideas are delicious all by themselves. But if you feel like understanding Node-RED is a deal breaker for you and it's the thing blocking you from just jumping in, I also include content in there that will specifically teach you how to use Node-RED for Home Assistant automations. No prior experience needed. Now, if you prefer to do things your own way, that's okay too. I don't feel any type of way. You can actually go and nibble on some of this tasty video that you see in the right here, right now. Like, just go nibble on that and feed your soul.